you can probably just I'm going to invent a verb. Falcon your way through it.
I'll just run on adrenaline all the way through there. You know, I could take an ATV through a swamp and get this done.
Live from the Talking Joe Studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, today, baby, I got your money. It's me, Mark, and welcome to the Talking Joe, G.I. Joe Comics podcast. If you're new to the show, you can find out all of the details over at the website. talkingjoe.co.uk is that website. Today, we'll be talking about the Falcon Spotlight issue, G.I. Joe 288, which is a follow-up to our episode 141, released a few weeks ago, where we talked to the artist of the issue, Kewber Baal. So if you've not listened to that, you can dig into that to get the whole behind-the-scenes story. This episode, we are doing our normal deep dive into the latest issue, and joining me, as always, it's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners, and hello to our guest, who Mark's going to introduce right now.
He's waiting in wings. It's our man. Let me say a few words first. Yeah, joining us today, special guest, Carson, curator of the 3D Joe's website, author of Collecting the Art of G.I. Joe, the Operation Recall toy project, and Lieutenant Falcon cosplay extraordinaire, and so much more. Here he is, a long overdue special guest onto the onto the show. It is Carson. Here he is. Welcome, Carson.
Yo, Joe. So thank you guys for having me. I've been a big fan of the show, and I was very happy when Tim Finn kind of came on board, and it looks like it's quite the love connection. You guys have a good rapport, and I'm happy to see you guys keeping this going, man. Every time Tim's promotional ads, it just his social media shares with his face and the expression, and you can immediately tell how he feels about each book. So it's a very genuine way to kind of promote the series. So I've enjoyed it, man. I like what you guys are doing. Keep up the good work, and thanks for having me on the show.
It's great to have you, Carson.
Good to have you, because it feels like an oversight that we've got as far as we have almost up to 150 episodes without having you on. Wow. Because you're such a important figure in the community, a real force, and it could never be overstated enough. What you're doing in terms of your contributions, particularly around sort of building that the magnificent 3D Joe's website. It's a real asset to the community.
And very specifically, our co-host for our Devils Do Disavowed episodes, Jay Cordray, uses many images from 3D Joe's for the YouTube video versions of our podcast, and just last week was saying, man, I need to give a shout out to Carson and 3D Joe's because some of these pictures come from that site.
Awesome. It's a labor of love, and the crazy thing is I'm coming up on 10 years of building 3D Joe's. This year, 2022, will be the 10-year anniversary, and it's just flown by. I just never get tired of it, man. Whenever I've got some open time, I've got a laundry list of to-do items for building the website. It's never done. Literally last night, I spent 3 hours updating every single file card and card back and mint on card photo of the packaging for the 1989 figures. It's just a labor that's eating the one bite at a time. It is an insane workload, and but it always feels fulfilling to work on, because spin the figures around and see how the costumes resolve themselves from every angle, and just little pieces of feedback like that really make it fulfilling, because I feel like I'm helping the community, and we're all intertwined in this crazy G.I. Joe universe. And the fact that I've been able to contribute something that's so useful to so many people is amazing. You guys, of course, are more than welcome to use all the graphics you want on your YouTube videos. I have people reach out every now and then. They're like, hey, can I use your stuff for my YouTube video? I'm like, absolutely. Just put in a little disclaimer at the bottom, images courtesy of 3djoes.com, so people can know where to find more of the good stuff, right? We work really hard creating top quality image assets, and we're never satisfied with it. And that's why I was redoing 1989 last night. When I started out, it was,
specifically the comic book artists as well. They owe you this sort of invaluable kind of piece of contribution, that there's this amazing reference that they can go back to when they're having to draw these things in the books.
Yeah, I drew an amazing Transformers fan fiction comic when I was in 8th and 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th grade, and all I had was Transformers Universe, the 4-issue miniseries, and like pausing VHS tapes. And there is, in Transformers Universe, there is one character where you see a front and a back view, and that's Optimus Prime, because he gets 2 pages, and all the other characters, you got to know what they look like from the back. So very specifically, it's like, what does the back of the Hiss 2 look like, says random G.I. Joe comics artist. And we're certainly past the era where someone drawing an issue of G.I. Joe is going to get sent toy samples. Also, we should specifically call out, Carson, the great work that you and your small team of volunteers do on 3djoes.com, because there is a very, very, very well-known G.I. Joe toy and comic and merchandise reference website that everyone knows and loves, and it's been around for more than 20 years, and it's the thing that you get when you Google a lot of this stuff. And unfortunately, that site is having some permanent technical problems, and I feel like there's a very positive push that we as Joe fans who communicate with other Joe fans can make in encouraging people to go to 3djoes.com, because it is I say this in a very positive way. It is carrying the banner. It is carrying the torch for that other well-known G.I. Joe toy reference site that is falling on some hard times.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that wholeheartedly. I'll say the name if you don't mind me naming. Sure. But Yojo. Everybody knows Yojo. And the guys that were running Yojo are friends of mine, and we're colleagues, we're fellow artists. We're collaborative before it happened. But basically, the company was from under them to a Canadian company that just wants ad revenue and does really continue in archive, and so the 12 side of that archive basically was frozen in time as of 2018, and so it's very sad that happened, but we all got together, we talked collaboratively, and we decided what's the best path forward, and building out 3D Joe's appeared to be the quickest and safest and least expensive way, because we considered, do we do a new URL and build out a new infrastructure and kind of start from scratch, but combine our assets? Like, we considered a bunch of different stuff. And what we ended up doing was kind of selecting people that wanted to work on specific areas and giving them administrative, editorial, authorship. And so there's a lot to come, hopefully. I will say that it is a mostly thankless task, and it's not revenue driven, right? So people have to really want to do this for years on end. You will get thanks, like you guys just thanked me today, and it feels great. But you won't get a lot of money from it. You guys have probably noticed we don't even run ads on 3D Joe's, and that's like my line in the sand. I never ever want to run ads on 3D Joe's. I want it to be a minimalist, mobile friendly experience, and so I've stuck to that. So anyway, I appreciate every single person that has been helping me along the way. There are dozens of volunteers, so I won't try to name them now, but literally there are dozens and dozens of people that help me build this website out, that volunteer assets, that mail me toys, that do whatever they have to do, that edit Photoshop images for me, and I couldn't do it without each and every one of them. So I appreciate you guys giving a shout out to it. I will say the part that is really going to get a boost in 2022 is that pre-production tab. We've already got 5 or 6 creator profiles under there, and those creator profiles are like, each one of them is a book in and of itself. It's incredible. I think on the Bill Merkline creator profile that we just put out, there's 200 images. On the Ed Morrill creator profile that I'm working on right now, there's 11 pages in Microsoft Word without any images. So it's just a tremendous amount of content. And we're very excited to introduce some of these creators that were not so well known to the community in a very kind of authoritative documentarian way. It's pretty exhaustive. It's pretty comprehensive coverage. So that's been exciting, and that's definitely the direction that I'm most excited about for 2022 is building out the pre-production tab with the creator profiles and the pre-production pages for individual products. So
an amazing website that's only going to get more amazing.
I appreciate it. Yeah. So you're looking at one of the pre-production. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, this only thing dropped last week or so. It's the Cobra. The Cobra Trooper, I guess it would be commonly known as, but just some of the little tidbits that were included from this sort of, you think you know it all, and then there's something like this that comes along that sort of blows your mind. You think, I've seen, been looking at this for the best part of 40 years, and
right.
sort of assuming these things and new knowledge, like that loop on the arm of the Cobra Trooper, that's piano wire for garroting. I was like, wow.
Absolutely. So for 40 years, I thought that was like decorative, like maybe a ranking of some sort, some kind of insignia, like something to indicate, since, I don't know. I just assumed that it was kind of a military thing. And then you find out, no, that's two pieces of wood as handles with piano wire that you use to strangle somebody and cut off their arteries. Like, that's crazy. It takes the Cobra Trooper to like a whole nother level of like psychotic. So
I just want to toss in that I always thought it was sort of like what's on the other arm. It's like two bullets or two flares or two shotgun shells.
Yeah, I always thought it was like a hook
flare gun to me
if
too.
you wanted to.
Yeah, so the gun on his chest is what, a grenade launcher, and then those two shells are grenades. And I'm with Tim. I thought for the longest time that was maybe a flare gun or a signal gun, because it's kind of a weird looking gun, and I've never seen a grenade launcher that looks like that. So it's useful, to see these pre-production drawings, because they give us a lot of insight into what the designer was actually thinking when he created these designs. So everybody knows that's a Ron Rudat illustration. I believe he created it in 1981. And it's so cool to be able to read these annotations and figure out exactly what Ron was thinking while he was putting this together.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So
definitely you can, with the website expanding the way it is as well, you can just lose yourself in there for hours. So it's
awesome.
it's a great thing for us as the community. So I know you've got to get on. So and we, I think, would all between us, happily talk for hours on any given aspect of GI Joe. So let's keep on target.
All right.
So specifically, we're going to be talking about 288 and the Falcon on this show. But before we get quite to that, maybe let's just give a sort of brief plotted kind of overview of, how did you get into G.I. Joe and specifically the comics, and then how did you find yourself to this connection with Lieutenant Falcon?
Yeah, so it's kind of intertwined. I think, like many of you, I was growing up in the 80s, and the cartoon was on TV, and that was the first thing that caught my eye as a young, I believe, 5-year-old was when I first saw the cartoon on TV, and I just immediately loved it. I mean, to me, I always tell people this. I think the cartoon was intended to capture that younger audience, and the comic book was intended to carry us through our teenage years if we would stay hooked in and involved for that long. The comic book was always, more mature, and you could grow with it, whereas the cartoon was just kind of silly and fun. So the cartoon sucked me in first. And I begged my mom for 2 straight years, I'm not exaggerating, to buy me some G.I. Joes. She wasn't feeling it. She didn't want to do it, I guess. But she finally broke down in 1986. So I was 7 years old when I got my first G.I. Joe. I was born in 79. So I was 7 years old when I first got my first G.I. Joe. Her and my brother picked it up at the store, and then they came and picked me up at my friend's house, and they had this G.I. Joe with them. And I was like simultaneously thrilled and excited because it was my first one, but I was also a little bit let down because it was dial tone. And this was 1986. You could have had Bats or Beachhead or Snake Eyes or any number of other somewhat cooler figures than dial tone, let's be honest. And I love dial tone. There's nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with them, but spoiled little kid got his first Joe and wanted it to be a different one. So that was my first foray into the toys themselves. The comic book, I walked into Walden Books, which was in our local shopping mall. We didn't have a comic book shop in my town. at that time. And so I walked into Walden Books and saw it on the spinner rack, and I was already hooked on the cartoon, and I believe I already had a toy in hand by that time. And so I picked up the comic book, and that was it. Just a dose of that made me, I think it changed the trajectory of my life. It made me a lifelong comic book consumer and a lifelong comic book reader. And it also pushed me into a life of creation. By sixth grade, I started drawing comic books. By 12th grade, I had drawn 6 full-length comic books, 22 to 24 pages each, that I had written. Most of them I created. I think 4 out of the 6 I created all of my own characters. So I would create all the little bio pages and everything too. One of them I did was an X-Men one, and I even colored that one with Prismacolor pencils, you know. So the comic books literally turned me on to a life in the creative arts. Now, I ended up going to college at the College of Design at NC State. And by that point, 1997 through 2002, I ended up getting a degree in mass communications and a degree in art and design. And I transitioned from wanting to be a comic book illustrator to doing video and animation because, to be candid, I didn't want to be a starving artist. And I was going to a lot of the comic conventions, and I was talking to the premier artist of the time. I remember Joe Madrera, who was a cover artist for X-Men at the time, having a really formative conversation with him about the kind of the economic insecurity of comic book art. And he was on top, and I was nowhere near as good as him, nor would I ever be, was the way that I felt about it. So that's what kind of made me pivot to something more technologically challenging, where I could separate myself from some of the other artists that were running alongside me in just the illustration area. So I feel like me and Tim Finn have a lot of commonalities. Tim, don't you teach animation?
I do.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of commonalities. Did the comic books and cartoons put you in that direction as a kid?
Yeah, but lots of animation. I mean, G.I. Joe and Transformers were my favorites. But yes, I was watching too much TV, and my first comic was G.I. Joe, and I became a voracious comics person immediately because of that issue.
I think, I was listening to an article or listening to a video interview with a guy from Mile High Comics and Jim Shooter just last week. Josh Eggebin posted it. And they were talking about how G.I. Joe was by far the largest mail order comic book, subscription-based comic book that Marvel Comics had in the mid-'80s. I think that comic converted or brought more people into the comic book, kind of domain than any other comic, because people had exposure to G.I. Joe through the toys on the aisles and the cartoon on TV. I think G.I. Joe the comic was a gateway drug for tens of thousands of people. I really do think that.
Importantly,
I have no data.
No, well, I mean, the proof is that the comic book was advertised on television. Like we conflate the animation that was used with footage of kids playing with toys, and then the ad was technically for the toys, but then a different version of that ad without the footage of the kids, but only the animation, which would end with Jackson Beck saying, "What happens next? Find out in Marvel Comics."
Marvel Comics.
That absolutely, because how many other comic books were advertised on television in the 80s? Zero. So
that was a first. That was
absolutely that is a link.
It's unacceptable. Look, G.I. Joe is beating us in the snow.
G.I. Joe is fighting Cobra, the enemy on land and sea and air. G.I. Joe,
And he's beating us in the air.
Joe's chasing Cobra in a desperate race, soaring and diving in a great sky chase. A real American hero.
There's only one man who can help us.
It's him. What's in store for G.I. Joe? Find out in Marvel Comics.
Would you talk about the character of Falcon specifically? What is your connection to this character?
So this happened pretty quickly. Like I just mentioned, my first actual retail purchase was Dial-Tone in '86, right? So I was only able to convince my mom to buy me figures from '86 forward. In 1987, 1 year into collecting these hardcore, because once I broke her down, the dam, it crashed open, and we were buying Joe's left and right, and she could just tell how happy it made me. And I had my little checklist, and I was going to karate class and trading doubles with other people to get the figures I had missed from the earlier years and stuff. So I went in hardcore. I immediately just became a collector and had to have them all. But 1 year later, 1987, I'm growing up in Southern Pines, North Carolina. My dad is driving 20 minutes to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to serve with the 5th Special Forces Group as the executive officer of 5th Group. He worked with 5th Group, 7th Group, I think 3rd Group, and he helped stand up JSOC, which is the Joint Special Operations Command, back in around 83, I believe. So we moved to North Carolina so my dad could be stationed in Fort Bragg. And he went on to do just basically special ops for the next 13 years, from 82 to 93 or 94. And so when Lieutenant Falcon came out, I was like, hell yes, this is my dad. Like, we had the same tiger stripe fatigue pants, shirts, the green beret, obviously. We also had the airborne berets. In my dad's storage. We would pull that stuff out and dress up like him. He was just a larger than life kind of like heroic figure to us. He was gone a lot. He left like the entire year of 1989. He served in El Salvador, helping the democratically elected government try to fight off basically a guerrilla rebellion there. So my dad was my biggest hero. And then to see him immortalized in plastic in 1987, to see the types of fatigues and accoutrement that we had in our attic that we put on and dressed up in, right there wrapped up around the G.I. Joe figure, and then to flip it over and look at the file card and see that this dude is from Fayetteville, which is right down the road from Southern Pines. On the other side of Fort Bragg is where Fayetteville is. And then to read the bio and see that he was I believe it says he's a 5th Group executive officer there as well. And then Project Blue Light, the counterterrorism unit. My dad also went to language school in Monterey, California, and learned Farsi and a couple other languages. So all this stuff lines up really well with what my dad's actual real life experience was. So, man, it was just surreal to me. I think this created this like lifelong, okay, G.I. Joe's just kind of my thing for life. And I think my dad, my dad was flattered by it, I'm sure. Like, what dad wouldn't want to be a superhero to their kid, So one year I remember telling him, because he's only 5'9" and I'm 6'3", right? So I remember telling him, hey, if you can find some tiger stripe fatigues that'll actually fit me now, I will dress up, I will cosplay as Lieutenant Falcon. And the very next Christmas came around and he bought me some tiger stripe fatigues, like some authentic tiger stripe fatigues. So then all I needed was like his web gear and his canteens and his flashlight and all the other good stuff that he still had around. And we took a trip to Fort Bragg together and bought a couple other pieces that were missing from the outfit. And that's how the Lieutenant Falcon cosplay came along. So what better way to, have fun with my dad? It was just like a fun little adventure to go on with him, to like trick out this costume properly, get the right communications gear, all that kind of stuff. That's his Vietnam watch that I'm wearing right there on my left wrist.
Oh, wow.
So, on my right hand, not a lot of people know this, but my dad made a ring when he was in El Salvador in 1989. He took some family gold down there. I think he felt bad about having to leave for the whole year and he wanted to do something special for us. So he made up a Special Forces ring. On the front of it is the De Oppresso Liber symbol. And then on the sides of it are the El Salvador seal, the year 89, the airborne wings, and my initials. And so on my right hand, I'm wearing a Special Forces ring, So it's all a very cool tribute to my dad. And that's all it was. Like, I'm friends with the people from the Finest. I had met them through going to all the conventions. I think what they do is amazing. They kind of bring these characters to life. And so I wanted to try it, and I gave my dad the challenge, and he rose to the occasion, and so I did it.
Cool.
So
I've got I'll just share something quickly here on the screen. I've got this is the trading card that you included in with the slipcase for the Art of book, and and you've got a little file card there with yourself as Lieutenant.
That's
Falcon.
right. I've got that
super cool.
I love that series of trading cards. I absolutely love it because every one of those Finest members like really put their passion, heart, and soul into the costumes that they come up with. Some of them with like custom helmets and fabricated materials. Like mine was like more real world, so it was easier to pull together. A lot of the Finest costumes are so much more imaginative and require a lot more heavy lifting than mine did. So all the respect in the world to the people at the Finest that work their butts off to make memorable costumes, to make people's convention experience more exciting and more memorable.
So this wonderful photo of you disembarking from the back of a C-130. Who took this photo? We should credit the photographer. Who took this photo?
Absolutely. Tim, I really appreciate you saying that. Every time I post something related to this, I always try to tag him as well. If you flip forward to that Cobra Trooper photo, That's me punching the photographer. So his name is Joe Goldston, and he has dressed up as a Cobra Trooper on a number of occasions. When we did the Falcon glider and the Viper glider, he was the Cobra Viper pilot, obviously. So he's on the bad guys, I'm on the good guys, but we're the best of friends. We've been going to all the conventions together since 2012, and we have a lot of fun with our hobby. He's a great guy.
When you go to conventions, though, you are more. I'm painting the picture for people who haven't been to conventions or haven't been to any recently. When you are at GI Joe conventions, you are more often tabling at your booth, selling your books and posters, and you are less often walking around in costume for photo ops. Correct?
Yes, for the most part, the books that I made, for good or for bad, they sold out in a year and a half. So I haven't actually had a retail table for the last couple years because I haven't had any books to sell. And I decided after, I think, 1 or 2 shows of bringing posters to it that it wasn't worth the hassle. So, if you guys want $5 posters, they're at 3djoes.com/posters, and it pays for the website. So please check that out. But yeah, I've been sold out, Tim, for the last couple of years. So what I've been doing, like at the Joe Fest this last year, I put on a panel, and that was a lot of fun. I love to do kind of educational content when I can. And I worked with the Joe Declassified guys at their booth. Shout out to Joe Declassified. The pre-production pages that we're putting together now are happening in large part due to the collaboration that came out of this whole kind of Yo-Joe debacle with it getting frozen out and everybody getting together and banging their heads together and figuring, okay, what's the right path forward? Those guys definitely, they signed up, man. They said, let's do this. Let's bring our powers together. And what they had been doing for many, many years is sharing a tremendous amount of pre-production stuff, but they were only doing it at shows, and they would have the most amazing booth at any of these conventions. 2-ups, sculpts, paintings, just all kinds of pre-production stuff, but you could only see it at the show. And for many years, they did, I think 9 years in a row, they were printing a magazine that they gave out for free. Like, these people do not do it for the money. They do it for the love of pre-production. And so we've partnered up and started to roll their pre-production out on 3D Joe's. And that's, like I was saying, going to be the primary effort for me this year, is to build out pre-production. But so if you see me at a show, I'll probably be at the Joe Declassified booth helping them do what they do, because I believe in their mission.
Cool. Have you got a next appearance planned?
Oh, I'll definitely be at Joe Fest. So, to me, Joe Fest was kind of the natural successor to JoeCon. It was already a 2-day show with a bonus kind of Friday night get together if people want a 3-day show. I really like how Ed Schumacher, who puts on Joe Fest, has taken great efforts to include the creators and some of the less frequented creators that maybe the G.I. Joe Collectors Club didn't do a great job of connecting with. I was able to get Mark Pennington there last year. He's the figure designer that followed up Ron Rudat. We did a panel together, so that was great. Ron Rudat, him and Jenny had their wedding anniversary. Ed Schumacher was like, let's make it a VIP dinner and we'll pay for it. And so nice. we had like 30 or 40 fans there for Ron and Jenny's anniversary dinner. That was amazing. So I really I feel like Ed Schumacher and the Joe Fest guys are giving the creators the respect that they have earned. And so I'm all in on Joe Fest. My other favorite that I really want to make it out to is Codename Iowa. Assembly Required, put on by Codename Iowa. So Brian Sauer is a good friend of mine, and he does amazing design work. And I just want to make it to that show because everything I've heard about it is that it feels like kind of a family gathering of really, tight, lifelong Joe fans. And I want to go be part of that family.
And I know Chris McLeod is a big fan.
And Ron Wagner lives in the area, and he is often a guest or is always a guest.
Yeah, I can't remember a year that he wasn't a featured guest. Yeah, so that's a big selling point for Assembly Required. So I definitely want to make it to Assembly Required. It's just a bit more of travel for me, but I just got to get over that. I just need to make it happen.
So we've got this amazing photo of you. Oh, who did you Photoshop the yellow, the blast from the shotgun?
Yeah, I added that. Yeah.
All right, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say we weren't able to fire live rounds. We were. This was at a battleship, I believe, in South Carolina, and they had a battleship that we went on and shot a bunch of photos on. But just on the kind of the shore area right next to that battleship, they had this beautiful kind of Vietnam era recreation that had all kinds of props, different types of vehicles. And so this helicopter, we were able to all load up in it and get these photos of like we're going into a mission or we're coming out from the mission. They had a bunch of dugouts with sandbags and stuff. It was a very cool space to do a photo shoot. So yeah, I just came home. This was my favorite image because it had such good motion to it. Like Joe Goldston did a really good job of, kind of spray and pray, shooting the heck out of it, super fast shutter speed. And he got some amazing, like, you see Muskrat right there behind me, running off behind me. We're both clearly in motion. We're not posing. Like it looks like we're actually like, we got some emotion and we're moving into combat. We're not just kind of acting. At least that was what I hope that people feel when they see that image. So
all right, so take us through. So this photo is from several years ago, but then
Yes.
all of a sudden, last month in December of 2021, an issue of
Yep.
G.I. Joe is published with a
Yep.
similar drawing. So what's the
That's
connection?
Yeah, so Mark mentioned the book series early on. The book series, Collecting the Art of G.I. Joe, is about a 3.5, 4-year project. We printed 1,000 copies, and I had those from after the Kickstarter for about 1.5 years. Well, John Royle, who's an amazing cover artist, reached out to me, and he candidly said, like, "Hey, look, man, I love your Collecting the Art of G.I. Joe book series, but I'm a comic artist, and I just don't have $200 to throw at it. Is there anything that we could work out?" And I was like, "Absolutely. I'm a lifelong G.I. Joe fan. I love your work on G.I. Joe. How about you just do a commission of Lieutenant Falcon for me? Because he's my favorite." And he was like, "All right, great. Just send me some reference material." So I didn't just send him this photo. I promise. I sent a bunch of other Lieutenant Falcon stuff. And I in no way expected that he was just going to draw the photo, right? That he was going to basically take that layout and composition and just do the John Royle on it, man. And so he did. There was a black and white image. If you can click back to the black and white line art. So that's the original commission that he did that we traded for the Collecting the Art of G.I. Joe book series, right? So he posted that on social media, and I think he got enough positive feedback on it. Let's be honest, we don't see a lot of Lieutenant Falcon in the comics, right? And people generally trash him because of Don Johnson's role in the G.I. Joe movie and that kind of thing. So when he posted this, it actually got a lot of really positive feedback. And so he was inspired by that to where he started going and pitching to Tom Waltz, "Can we do a cover with Lieutenant Falcon? Because I think there's some demand for it." So there was a brief segue, and it actually ended up being another cover. If you'll notice, in the last couple years, there's been a couple Lieutenant Falcon covers, and that all came from this kind of secret origin story. So he went and pitched Lieutenant Falcon to Tom. They're like, "All right, cool, just draw me up some ideas and we'll run with it." So the first thing that happened was the Croc Master and Lieutenant Falcon cover. And Croc Master's kind of coming in from the trees, like jumping in over them, and Falcon's surrounded by crocodiles, and it's a really cool piece. So I actually ended up buying that original piece of art from John, and that was a fun experience. But then 1.5 years later, I think it was a year and a half, he actually reached back out to me and he was like, "Hey man, you remember, that sketch that I did for you? I like that so much. I want to pitch that being the centerpiece of a cover." I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me? That is crazy." Like, the photo that I took wearing my dad's gear is going to be turned into a G.I. Joe cover. That was crazy. I literally never expected it. He's like, "Yeah, are you cool with that?" I was like, "Absolutely." So that's when he started working on the more refined image, which has Cover Girl, and they're coming kind of into so there's the Croc Master and Falcon art. You can see the process there with the line art and the color. But so he just basically came back and said, "Hey, that image of you running off the back of a helicopter, I want to turn that into a fully fleshed out cover." I was like, "Absolutely, go for it. Let's do it. Let me know if you need anything." So next thing, John's really cool about sending me kind of process stuff along the way. And so I was able to kind of follow along with that. But that's it. It's come full circle, from dressing up like my dad to being on the cover of G.I. Joe. It's pretty insane.
And to state the obvious, because everyone listening knows that we're about to talk about this issue.
Yep.
This issue is all about Falcon. So this
a
cover, a lot of covers don't represent the contents inside the issue. And so not only do we have a cool, right? I know I'm stating the obvious, but I feel like we need to put a button on this thread, logically. Like Cover Girl's not in the issue, but we rarely get a Falcon issue. We've never gotten a Falcon only Spotlight issue. and Falcon gets both cover B, and then also this retailer incentive cover, which was for every 10 copies that a store ordered of A or B combined, they were allowed to get one copy of this variant.
That's right. Yeah, I had to have my local comic shop buy 50 copies of this issue so that I could get 5 of the variants. They were very happy to do it for me.
Wow.
But yeah, Tim, we were talking about how covers are often so loosely connected to the interior contents of the book, how that's not really a priority anymore, it seems like, with a lot of these publishers. So how refreshing that we get some awesome Falcon covers with an awesome Falcon Spotlight issue. I couldn't be happier, man. Sometimes life is really surreal, and this is definitely one of those surreal moments.
I also appreciate that cover B, which is Kewber Baal's drawing of Falcon, and then also cover RI, retailer incentive by Royle and company, that they are very different from each other. And it's funny when occasionally we've gotten a Spotlight cover with a character, and then one of the other covers is actually kind of similar, even though 2 different artists were doing them sort of separate from each other. But here facing left, facing right, running, not running, more sort of animation colors versus a much more muted palette, solo versus with someone. Makes for these 2 covers make for a great contrast, and suddenly we seem to have a wealth of images of Falcon on the front of the book, which never happened before.
It really didn't. It really didn't. He was not a key element in the comic book. So it's been an interesting turn of events.
You've got a long journey ahead of you, Carson. So you do have to push on, and unfortunately can't stick with us for the full discussion. But be fun to just get your kind of higher level thoughts on what you felt. Generally what you thought of the issue.
Sure, absolutely. I like that it started with a small intimate moment of him at the JFK Center. I thought it was a nice way to, bring in kind of the origin story. It's interesting to see the kind of modernization of the story of Falcon. Obviously, he can't be a Vietnam veteran, right? He would just be too old for this era of readership. And so it's always been interesting to me how they modernized the story. If that was, 15 years ago, so he was there in 2006, the obviously ongoing wars in the Middle East were already started. They did manage to work Vietnam into it, with his father being a Vietnam veteran. And there was some political statements there, about how the DOD was not willing to admit that his father was exposed to Agent Orange and that potentially killed him. We're okay with spoilers, right?
Yeah.
I've only spoiled the first couple pages, but anyway, so I really liked the kind of small and intimate scene that they introduced him with, and the quick bit of history that you got in those first couple pages. And then when we get into the meat of the story of this modern day current, I guess this is really a flashback though, because what this becomes is an origin story of Fast Draw, Law and Order, and Lieutenant Falcon. So it's not really just a solo on Falcon. And I was good with that. I appreciated that. I like that they kept it kind of era specific. So obviously us as kids and collectors, we got Law and Order, Fast Draw, and Lieutenant Falcon in 1987. And they stuck with that, right? So they introduced those 3 1987 characters in this book. I enjoyed the kind of language that Larry uses. Obviously, he's a veteran. He knows his stuff. And so when he's talking about a butter bar, I've heard my dad say butter bar with that kind of disdain many times in his life. It's a second lieutenant straight out of ROTC. You've got that one vertical bar that's got that kind of gold bronze color to it. And, butter bars, they're coming out of 4 years of ROTC. They're not battle tested. And, people like a sergeant that's been in for 15 years but worked his way up to get to that, they have to answer to these butter bars. And there's this bit of contention in the military between, second lieutenants fresh out of school and people that are more seasoned. So I enjoyed that language, but I really liked that Larry was showing, Duke was the sergeant and he was the seasoned one. And when Falcon came along, he was his brother and he was an officer, but he might, if he's just a second lieutenant, he really hasn't earned his stripes that much. Not like Duke, who's probably been in it and been through more. So that was cool to see that kind of part of the story set up. The whole what do you say, PFC? You'd rather come out of a butter bar than a PFC, a private first class. So they don't even put in the asterisks and explain necessarily what some of the acronyms stand for anymore. Yeah. And there's this expectation of the reader that, hey, if you don't understand something, you can look it up. Has that been y'all's experience with G.I. Joe lately? That it's just kind of it's giving the reader the benefit of the doubt that they know the military jargon by this point?
Yeah, for quite a large extent, we've noticed that there's some of these terms that don't have the asterisks and editors' notes, quite to the degree that there was in more so in the original run.
Yeah, and like as kids, they were very conscious of that, and there was editors' notes all over the place. When LRRP, they might even put in pronunciation LRP, or Long Range Recon Patrol or whatever. I always loved growing up as a kid, reading the G.I. Joe comic, learning some stuff from Larry, and then dropping it around my dad. So he thought, how does my kid know a little bit of my world like that? So that was always pretty fun. But anyway, I just noticed that evolution from when we were kids, they tried to explain everything to us. And now maybe the expectation is there as a reader of G.I. Joe that you probably already know these things, or they expect you just to right click and look it up really quick.
And we've got the tools where we can look these things up more easily than we could as children when the internet didn't exist.
Right. So getting into the action part of the story, though, there's a few hostages, and they send in Lieutenant Falcon to kind of save the day and make the rescue. I got a very Chuck Norris, like prisoners of war kind of. It immediately put me in that. Do you guys remember those? I think there was 2 or 3 of them where Chuck Norris would go into a Vietnam POW camp and single-handedly rescue people.
Yes. Yeah,
so that's immediately where my mind went with that. I was like, oh hell, we're sending Lieutenant Falcon on a Chuck Norris mission. So that was pretty fun and exciting. I thought the only thing that was a little too convenient was, the problem was if you came in from the west, they had mortars set up and they could decimate any type of frontal assault. And if you came in from the east, there was this impenetrable swamp, and that's your big problem. And you're like, okay, well, how are you going to solve that? I thought it was a little convenient that Lieutenant Falcon just rode an ATV through the swamp and used a couple tools to help him get through there. Maybe a winch and like some other stuff that he mentioned. I just thought that was a little bit too convenient of a solution. So that's the only thing you guys have heard me say negative about the comic. It set up this, impenetrable fortress, and then he penetrated that thing pretty easily. The fact that they waited for the helicopter to get directly over them before they pulled out the surface-to-air Stinger missile was maybe a little ill-advised as well. But I guess it's good for dramatic purposes. And also just so Falcon can have that cocky look when he says, like, grab the long box in the back. This is exactly what I wanted to happen, was that the helicopter would get directly overhead before we bother shooting it. So those are probably the two moments.
Maybe that's the trade-off, because then the next page he gets shot. Maybe Hama's wagging his finger at this character a little bit. Don't get cocky, Falcon.
Yeah, if you would have shot the helicopter down further away, those troops on the ground would not have been able to get to you so easily, right? So you got a good point there, Tim. If he didn't make that strategic decision to wait until it was directly overhead, he could have prevented the hand-to-hand combat that they had to go through right after that. So multiple people got shot.
I also think some of the sort of impenetrable swamp is there's a little bit of a superhero element to G.I. Joe where is it the Russ Heath issue where, help me out, where Storm Shadow is put in jail? It's in the 20s, right? And it's like the jail cell has no seams and Storm Shadow just gets out. And you're like, how did he do that? It's like, no, he did that because Larry Hama is the writer and he's a ninja and Storm Shadow's a ninja and we're all like 8 years old and like ninjas are freaking amazing. And like, if you like stuck a microphone in the writer's face and said, no, explain how he did that. He's like, I'm not revealing the magic trick to you. It's a story. It's magic. Like he's a freaking ninja. So I think some of this is Hama the writer like winking at us, right? It's like, because
Right.
we've seen this before. Like the bad guys are like, well, they're not going to come from the front and the rear is impenetrable. It's like, oh wait, I think I know where they're going to come from. They're going to come from where it's impenetrable. Like, no, Green Berets are that much of badasses.
Right.
And also, I do wonder if this is one of these very small contractions where it's a 20-page story and not a 22-page story. And I imagine as an individual without a teammate, like doing the winching around a tree and then like going back to the ATV and pulling yourself forward and then like doing it again at the next tree and then again to the next tree. That's actually really tiring and difficult. And it seems easy because it's like, well, he's got a vehicle. He's got a swamp vehicle. But I wonder in a slightly longer version of this story, or a version of the story with maybe without the 3-page framing at the beginning, if we might have seen a little bit more of Falcon's effort. But the more of that we see, the less of sort of the like surprise and magic and superhero. It's like, how did he do it? He's a freaking Green Beret.
Right. Right. And I did like the commentary coming from Law and Fast Draw, where they were talking about how only a Green Beret could have pulled that off. Correction, only a badass Green Beret, you know. So it was definitely enjoyable. I mean, I'm not going to lie, man. I got chills at multiple points in the comic. One of it was when they asked basically like, where's the rest of the rescue team? And could you pull up that page? I don't want to butcher the line.
Yeah, give me a second.
It's Lieutenant Falcon's glorious line of the book. I absolutely got chills.
Oh, Carson is jumping ahead to favorite line of the issue.
Yes. And that's it. And you guys probably knew I was going to say that, right? You know, where's the rest of your rescue team? I'm Lieutenant Falcon, and there's nobody else but me. Like, yes. And
the way he's, for people listening and not watching this podcast, the way that he's saying it, they're all running, he's in the lead, and he's saying it with a very cool and calm face. He might be bragging, but he's also saying it matter-of-factly. He knows. He knows he's a badass. He knows it's his issue. He knows he's on the cover.
He knows it's his spotlight and their supporting cast, right? So I do have to say, Order stole some of the show, though. It was pretty awesome to see Order in there.
Yeah, there's some great Order bits.
What a great way to introduce, you know, these 3 characters to the G.I. Joe universe. It's amazing that here we are 288 issues later, and we're still getting these awesome origin stories for different characters that just haven't been given their moment in the spotlight like that. So that's the benefit of a universe where you've got literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of characters. I think from 1982 to 1994, they released 482 figures, maybe. Obviously, some of those were multiple versions of the same character, but not a lot of them. And so, man, there's just a treasure trove of characters to pull from for this franchise, and a lot of characters that deserve more time in the sun. So it's awesome to see it happening.
This is why I'm always rooting for the book to be bi-weekly.
Like,
no, I know it's very hard on the talent, but I would pay twice as often to get twice as many issues.
Absolutely, man. And you know, look how many new characters they're introducing over the last decade. Don Moreno and Helix are going to be the spotlight next month, right? And those 2 characters have come about in the last decade or so. So there's so many different characters to cover here with this property, and you really can't give them all their due. So yeah, Tim, I support the bi-weekly thing. I don't know if Larry's up to it.
I think as much Larry, it's the team, like an editor wrangling that, a letterer and a color artist, whether you get the regular people to do it twice as often, or you pull in additional people and keep the regular people at their regular schedule. Like, you know, you see 5-10 years ago when DC Comics was doing it with Batman series like Batman Eternal, or with 52 or Countdown. It is, even for a big company with a lot of money and talent to throw around and move around, like eventually every book just like has scheduling problems.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, G.I. Joe has had a couple publishing dates pushed back recently, so we don't know if it's already a challenge just doing the monthly. You know, I just, more than anything, with all the talk lately of Will IDW have it throughout 22, or is maybe another publisher going to be able to wrangle away the rights? I just want Larry to keep doing it as long as Larry wants to do it. And just from a milestone perspective, I want to see him hit 300. Even though he's written way more than 300 G.I. Joe comics if you count special missions, I just want to see him hit that milestone. Like, what other creator in our generation, Chris Claremont didn't do that many issues of the X-Men, right? Marv Wolfman didn't do that many of Teen Titans. Like, what else compares to Larry doing 300 issues of G.I. Joe?
Yeah, there are things that, like those, Sergio Aragonis on Gru, Stan Sakai on Usagi Yojimbo, but like even Stan Lee and Jack Kirby on Fantastic Four or Thor top out, at 100 issues or so.
Yeah, it's unfathomable, and I don't think we'll see it again, just based on how the comic industry is going and how often people move around property to property, and how they're now going from industry to industry. A lot of them go into video games or TV or whatever. So I think Larry's kind of that generational talent. I really want to see him hit that milestone.
So Carson, Mark, you might have your own wrap up thought or question, but I'll lob you one. Now that you have gotten your very excellent Falcon cover, I should say covers, because it's 2 on this issue, and Spotlight issue, what is left for you and Falcon in the toys, in the comics, in media?
Tim, I don't know. I honestly, I never, ever in a million years would have ever imagined this whole scenario playing out. Like, truth is stranger than fiction. Life is crazy. I think when I posted this, that was my lead in. Life is crazy. You just don't know what's going to happen. All I can do is just continue trying to put good energy out there, be positive and optimistic about the brand because I love it, and put hard work into 3D Joe's and the other kind of complementary products. And you never know what's going to come out of it, man. And this was just one thing. If I hadn't done that book series, John Royle wouldn't have reached out to me to trade for them, and he wouldn't have done the commission, and he wouldn't have done this cover. And so you just never know what's going to come back. You put out good energy and hard work, and you hope that something good comes back in return. And this was something amazing,
Wonderful. Good idea to end it on. But before we wrap up, just to give you an opportunity to give a shout out to anything else that you wanted to promote, point out, whatever. So I know you've got some pretty cool projects being lined up for 2022 as well. So absolutely.
The long overdue one is the books, right? The Collecting the Art of G.I. Joe series sold out a couple years ago, and I get asked about it at least on a weekly basis. And so what we're working on is an omnibus hardcover that will recollect all 6 of those volumes. But 1982 to 1986 has been completely redone. We've reshot everything. We've rescanned every box. We've done all the Photoshop editing again, because it wasn't to the level of quality that Chad Huckle and I were happy with. I've gone around the country interviewing the old creators. We filmed 40 hours of interviews that I'm going to use as material, as research fodder for that omnibus hardcover. So it'll be more chock full of research. I've been gathering unadorned art archive. I've been able to purchase some paintings and Kodachromes and that kind of stuff. So I'm sure we'll see those. So all that will be included in the omnibus hardcover. I should be kickstarting that within the next month. I just moved though, and so that kind of has thrown a monkey wrench in my timing. But I'm working on brand development for that book with Ed Morrell's son, Sean Morrell. A lot of people don't know who Ed Morrell is, but he worked on G.I. Joe from 69 to 89. And so I'm refining that before I get ready to kind of go to Kickstarter and do the pitch. I'm working with the Morrells to make sure that this book looks as good as it possibly can. And then the next thing, I've worked with all the creators while we did those 40 hours worth of interviews over the last year and a half. We actually made an all new action figure from start to finish, from sketches to presentation art to package art to sculpted figure to 3D designed and printed accessories to a hand sculpted carrier pigeon by Bill Merkline. He's a spoiler alert. He's a radio teletype operator. And I actually submitted this concept to Hasbro in 1989. And so here we are 30 years later, and we've brought it to life. So that'll be coming out. And Mark, you already alluded to that. We're calling that Operation Recall, because in the military can recall old veterans to back to service in times of great need. And so basically the pitch is, in this era of action figure stagnation, I've recalled the veterans to design all new action figure concepts. So you guys will be hearing a lot more about that, hopefully very soon.
Very cool. I look forward to it, as I'm sure many people across across the fandom are. So yeah, look forward to finding out everything that will be involved in that. And yeah, it feels like there's a massive appetite for it. Even Hasbro have realized what the fans want, and a kind of slightly sort of changing direction on their retro line, and sort of heading more towards the recall direction.
I'm eager to see it. I'm very eager to see what they do with the O-ring stuff. It's amazing because, we've been asking for it for years. And I remember at the conventions, probably 5-7 years ago, talking to, Vice President of the Boys Toys, Daryl DePriest, about it. And, we just got constant pushback. Like, it's impossible. O-rings will never come back. We've thrown away all the molds. The hardware is too expensive. It's just not going to happen. Like, any number of excuses. And here we are, 2022, the 40th anniversary of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. And O-rings are coming back. I could not be happier about it. I'm thrilled that Hasbro's doing it. I hope they create some all new original designs. I hope it's not just recreating what we got in the 80s. I hope that they do bring some, I'm sure they're going to do a lot of that, like they've already shown with the Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow 2-pack. But I hope they also throw in the mix some new designs. And if they don't, we will with Operation Recall. So how about that pitch?
There we go. Excellent. Cool. So I think you've got a long drive ahead of you, Carson, so I won't hold you up any longer. But right. Yeah, thanks for joining us today. It was great to hear have you full stop, have you on, just talk to you, but also specifically get some of those stories about how how your involvement with the cover, how that all came about. So that was some great stories.
Awesome.
So,
it was a surreal experience, and I really appreciate you guys for having me on. I enjoyed the company, Mark and Tim. So you guys, anytime if you want me to come back on, just let me know.
Sounds good.
Yes, for sure. Let's not leave it so long.
And we, Carson, I look forward to as public health in America in 2022 hopefully gets better. I look forward to seeing you in person at a convention.
Dude, I love it. Look forward to it, Tim. Can't wait to see your book updates too, man. I know you've been working in the background. I'm excited to see what you've been cooking up.
Thanks.
Yep. Talk to you guys soon.
Bye, Carson.
Cool. That was great having Carson on, sort of meaning to have it, try and get him involved and have him on a show for a long time. So I feel it was much overdue. So great to have him on before we continue talking about this issue.
Yes, fans, visit Carson Metaxas at 3djoes.com. But before you do that, listen to Mark and I talk about issue 288.
Cool. Just as a side story, Tim, how long have you known Carson? You've met him a few times in person, right?
Yeah, always at JoeCon. I think the first one might have been the one in Texas, and I'm blanking on the year, but about 10 years ago sounds right, because he was selling the posters for 3D Joes. And if you haven't seen these, listeners, there are a couple of them. They're, I think, 18 by 24, standard poster size. They're all white, and then laid out in a grid, not with an actual grid, but laid out in rows and columns are photos of every figure fully geared up. And there's one poster for, I think it's like 82 to 85, every figure, and then another poster for like 86 to 89. And at the time, he was selling two versions, ones with just the images, and then ones with the images, and I think everyone's name in black type under them. And Larry Hama, at one point or another in the last several years, has had one of them up in his office.
Excellent.
So I think certainly
very useful.
I think at one of those early conventions, Carson walked up to Hama and was like, "Hey, your comic's awesome. You're great. would you take this poster? And Hama's like, sure. And then Hama's like, well, I like go to yojo.com, and probably at the time people weren't going much yet to 3djoes.com. But, Hama has talked about, I think he said this out loud, or he may have said this in a letters page in the comic in the last 2 years, but it's sort of easier for him to write about a character, or he might be more likely to think of putting a character into an issue of G.I. Joe if there's a figure of them in front of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or maybe by extension, if there is a poster with a bunch of figures in front of him.
Yeah. I remember hearing or reading that definitely in the letters page.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, we are talking about issue 288. If you haven't yet realized, you're not paying attention. It was released on 8th of December, 2021. And the creative team were writer Larry Hama, as always, artist Kewber Baal, colors Jay Brown, letters Neil Utaki, senior editor Tom Waltz, editor Megan Brown, and research specialist Diana Davis. And they've got a little blurb in the front for this issue, which is interesting. It says, "From loyally serving his." Actually, Tim, why don't you read it? You'll give a break from me.
Sure. From loyally serving his country in the Special Forces to protecting the world as an elite G.I. Joe warrior, he's seen his fair share of triumphs and tragedies. And now, with a new, unknown threat on the horizon, his chaotic past will clash headlong with his precarious present, as he prepares to help his fellow Joes stave off Cobra's latest attempt at global terror. His name is Vincent R. Falcone, and this is Spotlight, Lieutenant Falcon.
Thank you, Admiral Akbar.
I'm sort of doing my Jackson Beck.
So that sort of blur for the sit rep sounds like it might have been written before they saw the script. Their sort of chaotic past clashing with his precarious present, unless it's foreshadowing something to come. But interesting. Let's look at the covers, shall we?
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
So cover A is another section of the Freddie Williams II. It's not a triptych. It's a quintic. The 5-part connecting cover where we've got a Joe battle with Cobra at the Statue of Liberty. And this one has Dawn Marino as Snake Eyes jump kicking a Crimson Guardsman with Stalker on a jetpack in the background, and a bat getting shot in the face in the foreground. I don't have, if you've listened to previous episodes, you know how I feel about this particular Freddie Williams II 5-part connecting cover, so I'll just say repeat. I will say Freddie Williams II is drawing not just covers but interiors for a Godzilla Power Rangers crossover. It's in the new issue of Previews, right? So it's stuff that your comic book store can order that'll come out in, I think, March, and it's a mini series published, I think, by Boom, but it might be technically in association with IDW because IDW has the Godzilla Comics license. And I gotta say, Freddie Williams II has done lots of really neat 1980s properties in comics. He did the 3 Batman Ninja Turtles crossovers that DC published with IDW, and he did the He-Man Thundercats crossover. Do I have that right? And I'm a little jealous because he's only done covers for G.I. Joe, right? And he did some covers for a previous G.I. Joe series at IDW, the Other Continuity, and I think he did he do some Revolution covers that involve some Transformers? But I keep
that's right.
I keep hoping that in addition, it's all these other brands where he's doing covers and interiors, and I would really love him to do covers and an issue of G.I. Joe. Cover B is drawn by Kewber Baal and colored by his wife.
Chimerispa.
Thank you. And in our previous episode about this issue, I spotted a second signature on the cover, but Baal revealed to us that he had sort of forgot to tell editorial when he turned in the image. He'd sort of forgotten to tell editorial that he drew it and someone else colored it. And so the credit on the inside front cover of this issue just says art by him and doesn't designate anyone as the color artist. And then retailer incentive cover is penciled by John Royle and inked by Jagish Kumar and colored by James O'Frady. And separate from the fact that it is a drawing of a photo of a nice guy who's a good G.I. Joe fan and person and steward, it's also just a very fun and exciting cover. There's a lot of action because Falcon's running and there are guns going off and explosions behind him. There's a foreground element at the very top of the cover, which is this Cobra, the printed comic with the logo. I thought it was a Cobra flag, but seeing it without the G.I. Joe logo, it looks maybe more like it's like at the bottom of like the side of a HISS tank or a panel on a doorway that has the Cobra logo on it. But in either case, it's a nice element that adds some depth to the cover. And
the detail of which is mostly lost on the printed cover because it's behind the logo. So
yes,
can't see a huge amount of the edges of it, can you?
Similarly, in the Virgin version without the logo, the moon is a big part of the cover and is really striking because there are two missiles in front of it and it's the furthest thing in the distance. The version printed with the logo, you sort of lose the moon. And I wouldn't say that the cover then becomes too busy because there's actually, in terms of objects, not a lot happening in the background, but there is a lot of color happening in the background. And I don't know quite how to explain walking this fine line, but there are color artists who, it's like, I'm looking at this cover and in the bottom right where the signatures are, it's like aqua and gray aqua. And then above it, there's yellow behind the explosions. And then above it is orange, which becomes purple. And then going counterclockwise past the moon, there's a deeper purple. And then below that, there's a gray violet. And then below that, behind CoverGirl's weapon is more of a neutral gray. And then below that, behind the fire is sort of a gray peach orange. And then the rocks that CoverGirl is propped up on are sort of a warm girder or rock, which then becomes a cool girder or rock because it becomes aqua again as we loop back to where we started. And there are color artists who maybe it's the art that the colors get put under, or maybe it's the very specific choices. I feel like there are color artists who, with this arrangement and this number of colors, it would be ugly, unappealing, or too busy. And I don't quite know how to say it, but something about this, it's not. I find it really exciting and quite pretty. It's not too much. As a contrast, the colors on cover B, where Falcon is standing calmly looking to the right, are muted and I don't say this as an insult, dirty, right? And I think that comes from like an ink wash treatment at the inking stage, or no, I guess it's just the application of color, right? A digital brush that mimics like watercolor. I do think in terms of selling a comic book to people at a store, I do think John Royle's cover ARAH, is the winner. And I'm always a little sad when sort of the most exciting cover of the three for a month of G.I. Joe comics is the one that is rarest and hardest to find, because I want this comic to do everything it can do to get people to buy the book. And no offense to Kewber Baal's very calm, cool, steely focused cover B with Falcon in that helicopter. But if GI Joe is an action comic, cover RI is the cover that has the most action, and then compared to cover A with Snake Eyes on it, is the one that most represents the issue. So if there's something in IDW's calculus about, well, John Royle draws in a very like hot, like Jim Lee, J. Scott Campbell style, and if we make that the aspirational cover, people will order more copies to get it, and then in total we sell more copies. If that's what is best for the book, then I accept that. But sort of at face value, I do wish that the cover of Falcon running was just sort of the common cover A.
Yeah, I just had a thought about sort of your note around the colors, and there is a lot of going on with the colors but it still works, and I think it might partly be down to kind of John Royle's quite open style, but that that has very clear delineation of the quality of the line. So there's there's a difference between the thickness of the line that he's using on the drawing, and it sort of really makes the shapes stand out and stand apart, so that it's not getting, I guess, overcomplicated by the colors, because of that aspect. I think helps it. If there was a lot, if the art was a lot busier with the line work and the cross hatching and the details, and also didn't have, I guess, that difference in how the line is treated, I could see that this getting a bit busier and harder on the eye.
Yeah, maybe a comparison is John Royle's cover from several issues ago of Law fighting the Desert Scorpions, where there was a lot happening in the background. And here, like, yes, there are 2 helicopters and 2 explosions, but effectively there's no background. It's not like Falcon and CoverGirl are in front of a fortress and a gun emplacement and the woods, right? It's everything behind them is basically negative space. And so James O'Frady can go a little nuts with these gradients, which, on paper I wouldn't like, but I think are quite nice here. I think this cover would also work if James O'Frady had picked, 2 or 3 colors for the background instead of 8 or 9. But this cover does have some latitude. How does the issue overall, Mark, work for you?
Yeah, good. I think it's a very good issue. Works well. Shall I get into the plot breakdown?
Oh yeah.
As a reminder of exactly what happens. So 15 years ago, Vincent Falcone is visiting the JFK Special Warfare Museum and is advised by the sergeant giving the tour if he wants to serve, he should go to college and enter the ROTC. That kid would go on to be a Green Beret, ROTC commissioned, Special Forces trained, top of the class at Benning Jump School and Ranger School, and 7 years later, at Bolivia Wolf-Clickenland border, 3 soldiers, Brown, aka Fast Draw, Levine, aka Law, and Barkdale, aka Shallow Grave, have been held captive at an impenetrable fortified village. A general and his unknown suited spook send in a Green Beret to rescue them. The prisoners and their dog are made to dig their own graves in the woods. Actually, the dog doesn't dig. So, anyway. Barkdale is shot in the back of the head before Falcon comes to the rescue to make an escape through the swamp in an ATV. Meanwhile, the militia make chase in their hind helicopter, which Fast Draw is able to take down with a Stinger missile. A firefight ensues, with Law's dog Order making the final save. They make their escape along with the captured militia colonel. The general and the spook are offered to recruit all 3 into a covert action team, codenamed G.I. Joe. So the immediate thing that struck me was instantly trying to recognize where we were and who those mysterious figures were in those early pages, the general and the spook. And just looking from the preview page, I was like, that spook guy looks very familiar because of that sort of distinctive kind of hairstyle that he's got. And I was right. It was the characters that featured in issue 60, Cross Purposes, which was the Todd McFarlane issue. So this is set immediately or at some point before the events of that issue 60. That was the issue that introduced originally Falcon, Law and Order, Farstraw, and also Chuckles, who's not in this issue. So it's interesting that this is called a Spotlight, but in some respect it feels more like an untold tale in terms of it is a tale from the history of G.I. Joe, an origin that we didn't know that we wanted, but have been given, and it definitely is welcome. So giving us an unexpected backstory of Falcon, and to some extent Farstraw and Law and Order as well. The thing that struck me most is, I guess, the simplicity of the story. Sometimes we talk about how we, go from scene to scene and sort of the amount of things that are being juggled, and it felt much more simple and linear, that's possibly refreshing to some degree in terms of the type of story that we get. It was very, very easy to follow. I think pretty much all the aspects around it seemed pretty spot on to me. Good writing, good art, and we spoke in depth to Kewber Baal about his process, and hearing it from him direct, it was clear, how seriously he took this as an assignment, and that he really wanted to honor the fandom by putting in a well thought out and job that's definitely had a lot of consideration as to how everything works, hangs together, that there's thought behind the way that things look and flow, and that's seen on the page. So Tim, very long ramble from me, but I think those are my high level thoughts.
No, that's all great. Thank you. So just to remind me, not even everyone else. So the guy who I'm going to call Red Tie, because he's wearing a red tie, the guy with glasses who's got the particular hair and a jacket, the spook, the guy with the red tie, he is in issue 60, correct?
Yes,
but
correct.
The older, the other guy that he's talking to, the older guy who is in fatigues and puts on his helmet and says, "We don't talk about that out loud." We have not seen him before. He's new for this issue.
I think we could insinuate that these two are probably the spook and the general that feature in issue 60. So okay. I would think it would be a reasonable conclusion to say that these two are the two same baddies.
Okay, because I saw on the Talking Joe Facebook page, I saw you or someone, sorry someone if it's not you, post a panel from issue 60 of Red Tie, but I don't remember if the older guy in fatigue was also shown in that panel.
Yeah, the general character I think is less kind of obviously got a bit more of a generic look to him, and here he's in fatigues, whereas I think in the other issues he's more in a uniform, so it's a less obvious like for like, whereas the other character it's a more obvious sort of line to draw.
So my and listeners, you might have figured this out from our interview with Kewber Baal or the last hour with Carson. I love this issue. I think this issue is great, and I think it's working on many categories. So Mark just said that it maybe felt more like an untold tale than a spotlight, and I'm fine with those getting interchanged, or us having a flashback issue or a spotlight issue that is not designated as such. That certainly happened in the original Marvel run, like issues 26 and 27 or issue 84, where someone just tells someone else like their origin without it being framed with a flashback, or without the title or the cover or the solicitation in a catalog saying like flashback. This is neither good nor bad, just in terms of a narrative device. I was a little surprised that the 3 pages at the beginning, that we don't come back to that at the end. And I don't think we need to, but I sort of thought that if we started with young Falcon, we might end with young Falcon. Narratively, that doesn't actually work, because narratively we need to end with like these 3 guys deciding to join the team. But in terms of my expectations, similarly, a couple issues ago, Stalker and Scarlet are talking about Stalker's time in Vietnam, and the first 2 or 3 pages are Scarlet saying, Stalker, tell me about Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow back in Vietnam. And then at the end, it sort of wraps up with them back in the present day. Anyway, what I'm really struck by, we've already well covered with Carson, Falcon's badassery. I like the stakes of the issue that these Joes might die. Or they're not Joes yet, but these Joes might die, and it goes as far as them digging their own graves. And the panel where the bad guy says, "That's deep enough," and you see the 2 of them who are still alive kneeling in front of their own graves, and Fastraw's head is bowed, and their hands are both in front of them. And then the next panel, the same bad guy, has a gun pointed to the back of their heads. This is a little upsetting for me as a reader. It's a little chilling. Like, I don't think they're going to die in this scene or the next scene, but it gets pretty close and I'm worried. And so, the tension is like, oh man, how are they going to get out of this? And then 2 panels later, when we see Falcon creeping up in the background, and then that almost silent panel, wordless panel on the bottom, and Falcon's badassery begins. It's really exciting. What I'm struck by most in this issue, actually, the thing that sticks out the most is how precise and sterling and excellent Kewber Baal's art is. And I think it's so good. He's actually doing some things that we maybe don't notice, because we are used to a level of quality and consistency in G.I. Joe comics that I think what this is doing really, really, really well sort of subtly rises above a lot of comic art that we see. So here are a couple examples. And Baal referred to this first one when we interviewed him. He worked really hard to make everyone look different in this issue. Now, I'm totally fine with an artist having a stock face for men and women, or like 5 or 6 stock faces. Like if you draw a Batman comic, you are going to draw Bruce Wayne differently than Alfred, right? Alfred's going to be older, and maybe his face is narrower. And if you draw Commissioner Gordon, you probably do draw a slightly different face, and then you add a mustache. But in the deadline challenges of drawing comics, if you draw just sort of the same face on Bruce Wayne and on Commissioner Gordon, and the color artist gives Gordon like white hair and a white mustache, it's like, we understand they're different people, right? What Baal does here is he gives very specifically every single character in this issue a distinct face: eyes, nose, cheekbones, eyebrows. It's most apparent on Fastraw. Fastraw has big, thick eyebrows. But, look at the panel. Look at page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Look at page 8, panel 2. Actually, the one on screen, it's the next page, Mark, if you've got a bunch of files in front of you. It's the panel where it's the 3 Joes. There's no background. There's just white behind them, and Law is whispering, "Every minute we're still alive. There's hope. Don't give up." Right? It's really clear here because they're in profile. But Law's not technically in profile, but close enough. But Fastraw has a different nose than the other 2 guys. And like artists don't actually need to put this much work into comics. It's great when they do, and it does make for a more enriching reading experience. And maybe a bunch of the readers don't even notice that they like it more, or they like it more and they don't know why. But I will tell you why I like this more. All these characters look very different from each other. Two, Baal's.
I was going to say, just on Laura as well, you can see how he's picked up on that sort of that toyetic kind of look to in his hair. Well, not it's not toyetic, rather. They picked up on the cues in the toy where he's kind of, his hair is sort of slightly more flat to his head, and kind of, I guess, from the parting, how it works on the toy and stuff like that. And it's just subtly, not sort of like for like, just recreating the toy, but picking up some of the cues of how it's how it's shown on the toy, and how it's very different to another figure with another hairstyle.
Yeah. The second thing that I love about the artwork here is Kewber Baal's body language. He does really gorgeous, subtle things with posing. So everyone flip to page 1, right? Panel 2. That girl all the way on the left in the purple, like that's actually how a kid who's bored on a school field trip might be standing. And like, if she had both of her feet planted on the ground, that would also be fine. But Baal goes the extra mile here. And I don't know if Larry Hama's plot calls for one of the kids to have headphones on. And I don't exactly know if the kid listening to headphones, I'm assuming that's not when you go to museums, you can often get an audio recording. And so you can walk around the exhibit and like someone is like narrating for you to go to certain photos or vitrines or paintings. And I don't know if this is that, probably not. Or like a bored kid who's listening to music because they don't want to be on the field trip. So if that's in the plot, good job, the person who wrote the plot. And then the kid on the far right who's got the glasses, who looks, a little bored, a little neutral, and yet as a contrast, right? Like Kid Falcon is looking up in awe and delight. And then I wanted to point out one more example of really great body language. And I might slip and point out 2 more examples. Because every single page, right? Because I could actually do this in almost every panel and every page. Everyone flip to the last page of the comic. This big panel 2, the big panel. And this happens in almost every, yeah. So everyone on this panel, has a different pose. So Red Tie has his hands in his pockets, and the general has his arms akimbo, and Law is leaning forward and he's got one hand over the other. Fastraw has his arms folded, and then, Falcon has his arms folded, and then Fastraw has one leg up, which makes perfect sense. One hand is up on his thigh and the other hand is hanging. And notice even what he's doing with his right foot. He's pressing it up a little bit off the ball of his foot, so his heel's off the ground, right? And then in the final panel, right? Like all 3 of them are. It's the acting, the body language is so good, and I haven't even described one of my favorite words, storytelling, right? Like all the drama, all the sort of neutral scenes where someone's just talking to someone, and then the action. It is all like, here's my minimum, clear and legible in the issue, but it's actually all great. And my favorite example is that page where Falcon has revealed himself right after he takes out the guy with the knife. You turn the page, Falcon throws his knife, a shot hits the top of his backpack, and then in the big final panel, he pulls out a shotgun and takes out the bad guy, who is screaming and also dropping his pistol, and also Law is lunging for it, and also Law is like sort of getting pushed or out of the way or falling, and also Fastraw is jumping out of the way, and also there's a very slight there's a there's a rhythm to this page, and there's a really gorgeous rhythm to this panel where, because Law, if you squint, he becomes an arc. He becomes the shape of a crescent moon, right? He's like a parenthesis. You make an arc from his bottom foot all the way up along his arm, and then to where he's reaching for the gun. And then the negative space behind him of the tree sort of obliges that. And so this bottom panel has this really nice sense of foreground, middle ground, background. But this bottom panel is like almost subtly curvilinear perspective. It's almost subtly like a rounded 3-point perspective. And then this dynamic thing that Baal does with the top 3 panels, where they are like italicized. They're not straight up and down 90-degree rectangles, right? They're like parallelograms, and nothing covers anything else up. Nothing is like obstructed. You know, like in previous episodes, both in IDW issues and also in Devil's Due issues, I have said things like, oh, this person's like shoulders in the way of this other person, or like, oh, I can't see the prop because it's drawn too small, so I didn't know that it was important. And then the next page, when someone has this prop, I don't know where it came from. This page, like, Baal puts a ton of stuff in this, and this isn't like, yes, it's probably 5 sentences in the plot, like Falcon throws knife, knife hits guy while other guy draws a bead on Falcon, shoots Falcon shoots him back, while Law and Fast Draw like jump out of the way. But whether it was that or a little bit more, Kewber Baal makes so much of this page. The drawing in this issue is so good. And everyone who has drawn issues in the last year, you know, I've said things like, particularly when we've interviewed them, because it's true, and I really want this book to ship weekly. Like, give me 4 issues a month. I would love everyone who's drawn issues to come back and do another issue or a run of issues. I think Kewber Baal, as hard as it was for him to draw this issue with a tough deadline and like his like sleep, he was telling us that he has like a sleep condition, and he has insomnia.
Yeah. Hyperfocus.
Thank you. I'm going to say one last thing, and I can do it in a sentence.
And on this page that we're looking at as well, that you know, as well as the aspects you were talking about in terms of the way it looks as well, just that thoughtfulness of designing all of these characters to be slightly different, including those the militia characters. It just means that you can completely tell what is happening with that thoughtfulness of just differentiating these 2 characters slightly differently. You know, one of them has got a beard, one of them has got a cap and a red scarf. That means that as you're following, you know, who's doing what, you can easily differentiate it. So, you know, on the following page to the one we were just talking about, when there's the guy on the ground, you know, you can immediately see he's got knife in his neck. He's got the same gun, which is probably subtly different as well to the other guy who's got a pistol. He's got a beard as well. So it's all of these different cues that are sort of just building up subtly without us probably even noticing, to be able to decipher exactly who's who, where everybody is as well.
Yeah. I'll make these 2 last points very quickly because I was going on and on and on. Number 3, Kewber Baal can differentiate between people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's okay in comics when, you know, like talented or hot comic artist draws everyone at this sort of like uber age of 29, you know, and then like you want to draw someone older, so you just add some lines to their face, which is actually not what anatomy does, but hey. But the spook and the general, you know, their skin hangs differently because they are older. And you know, I talked about how like one of the things I like about a Herb Trimpe or a Mike Vosberg or a Larry Hama in those early 30 issues or so is that like Hawk is older than the other Joes. And, you know, like I don't see that in the Devil's Due issues. I just see him have like a different hair color and like one extra line on his forehead or something. But you know, the people in this issue are all different ages, and it's just a lot of skill at drawing anatomy. And then point number 4 about how great the art is in this issue. Kewber Baal often puts his camera low and slightly tips it up, which is a trick in storyboarding for action film and action animation. And in fact, the G.I. Joe cartoon did it all the time in the 80s, where you make characters a little bit more powerful if you put the camera a little bit low and you aim it up at them a little bit. So it can also emphasize things like who has power and who doesn't. So the page where the Joes have gotten sort of shoved out of the storage container where they've been held prisoner, and they're all sort of like leaning forward, and Fast Draw saying UNF exclamation mark off. And then one of the bad guys says, Sergeant Drevik, take the prisoners out into the woods, shoot them and bury them. The camera here is at like 3 feet and it's looking up a bit, right? In the panel right now that Mark is showing, that's the panel that Mark just moved off of. This happens over, take them down, growl. A way to add a sense of power and emphasis to your characters. And just think of superheroes. Think of like Superman or Batman, right? Or like Captain America. Like these people aren't like 5'10", like regular humans. They're like 6'3", and they're extra muscular. So even if literally with a camera in live action or drawing it in animation, you can have the camera look at them straight on. What if you pull the camera down a few inches and tip it up at them a little bit, which mimics the experience of the rest of us regular people seeing them? And so for action sequences, or for making like a Joe character more heroic, or a villain in this issue more menacing, and sometimes it's just about the dynamism of a page. It's not always about sort of physical power. This issue is really well drawn, and I would love Kewber Baal to come back and to do another issue or a run of issues. He is very good for G.I. Joe, and I will admit, when I saw his name in a catalog ahead of time and in the previous issue, I was like, who's this guy? That's not a name that I recognize. I don't know how I feel about a guy who hasn't drawn G.I. Joe before drawing G.I. Joe. And his cover for this issue, which was, I think, previewed in the last page of the last issue, and certainly I saw it in some catalogs, it's a good drawing, but it didn't blow me away because it's sort of too calm, and all that negative space on the right either wants something else to happen or some copy, like what is the mystery of Falcon's the mission that went wrong? Can Falcon rescue his so-and-so? Find out in Spotlight, the border of Barovia and Wolf Land. But having not been familiar with his work, and having not been initially wowed by this cover, man, did he put in the time and effort to pull off a tremendous drawn comic book in the G.I. Joe series.
Very good. The one, I guess, misstep that I had with this issue, if I'm allowed to move on to that, was probably in that early sequence where Falcon is describing his father, and that aspect around that he's been come into exposure with Agent Orange. He says it was Agent Orange, but we can't get the DOD to admit that. It took Vietnam 20 years, but it finally killed him. That aspect of his dad sort of being done wrong, essentially, sort of playing that against young Falcon's kind of very strong ambition to get into the army in his footsteps just seems a little bit incongruous. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that aspect.
It did seem incongruous. It didn't throw me off so much that it was okay for me.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't something that took me too far out of it, or I could not get past it. It seemed like a slightly, there was a strange kind of dichotomy between those competing ideals of my
Right,
dad's.
'cause-
I want to
'cause
follow
you-
my dad's footsteps, but he's been very badly mistreated by the army. It seems.
Right, 2 panels later, the turn is fast. No, made me want to be a Green Beret even more. Maybe a little more dialogue or a slightly longer version of this scene where the older guy sort of gets to convince him a little bit more. Yeah, I see your point about the turn being abrupt. I go back and forth because the target age for GI Joe is a little bit of a moving target, actually. The toy.
Kewber Baal himself was like, "What age rating is this? How much violence can I show?"
Yeah. We think of the Marvel Run. The Marvel Run was a Comics Code approved book. So blood wasn't red, it was brown or like silhouetted as black. We didn't see exit wounds. So it's like those were the rules of comics in the 80s. We have seen here and there in the modern IDW continuation of the Marvel Run, someone just shoots someone. And this did happen in the Marvel Run. I don't want to like revise it as if it never happened. I think because I've gotten sort of sensitive to like as I've gotten older, I'm sort of thinking about, I don't know, like my 10-year-old nephew and just sort of the politics of G.I. Joe and the politics of that surround a toy that is about soldiers. It's like, well, Star Wars can get away with it. Like you can shoot stormtroopers a lot and you can chop off arms with your magic laser sword, but like that's not okay. That's not okay in G.I. Joe because it's like, no, but guns are real. It's like, well, I mean, actually, these soldiers are keeping us safe, whereas Star Wars isn't real. So I think I've gotten a little aware or leery of this kind of action content in a G.I. Joe comic as much as I want it, because, if no one ever dies or gets shot, there are no stakes. It's like, I want Cobra Commander to be mean. I don't want him to be anemic. So I'm really struck when in a G.I. Joe comic, someone does just shoot someone, but it's a bad guy, and like this is based on actual conflicts that have happened in Europe in the last couple of decades. So it's not cheap. And similarly, a few pages later, when Falcon gets a knife in one of the bad guys, and then Fast Draw gets to hit someone else in the face with a shovel. It's like, no, that I enjoy that feeling because this bad guy just made Fast Draw dig his own grave with that shovel. Mm-hmm. So the Joe should get some justice. So I was struck by the action content in the issue. I'm not saying it was bad or I found it upsetting. I was just struck by it.
It's striking the sort of the level of violence. It's less cartoony. It feels more. There's more real life kind of real lifeness or real life jeopardy to it in terms of that they're digging their own graves. That's pretty horrific concept, and poor Barkdale gets shot in the back of the head, and it feels like we see slightly more violence on screen or on panel than is actually shown, because we're our imaginations are filling in some of the gaps on the YouTube video we're showing the Larry Hammer's suggested panel for the layout of this, so that Barkdale's headshots is less graphic, so storytelling assist, so that we're seeing the storytelling behind that concept rather than necessarily the full on head exploding, and similarly the Kewber Baal's original pencils on that Falcon with the knife to the throat was originally drawn, being pulled across it with the all of the blood on display, whereas actually on the published page it's just showing the initial touching of the knife to the neck and not the ensuing gore. So it's clever. It's clever storytelling in terms of how we're being shown these levels of violence.
I'm trying to remember when IDW was publishing the other continuity, the IDW continuity, right, with Chuck Dixon's G.I. Joe and the Chuckles book in Cobra, and then G.I. Joe Origins. Am I remembering correctly? I'm not sitting near my issues. Did they have like very small on the back cover, like right under the barcode and the price? Did they say like recommended for ages 13 and up?
Ooh, I couldn't remember that off the top of my head without looking.
I do recall, and unless I'm recalling wrong, that halfway through this Larry Hama run that continues A Real American Hero, there was a year or two where the Larry Hama book at, I don't know, issue like 190 or 210, for a little while, it did get that. It did say, like, suggested for readers 13 and up. And I remember being really irked at that because the book, the Larry Hama G.I. Joe book, didn't seem like vicious compared to the Marvel issues. I think as coloring in comics has gotten more realistic, if you like sort of are painting all of the colors of someone's complexion and their clothing and the sky, as opposed to like comics in the 80s, it's like light blue, medium blue, light green, and then the whole background is just going to be yellow. I do think that modern coloring can add some intensity without sort of like trying to add intensity, just trying to add realism. But this also happens. I think this also happened on the regular IDW Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book, the one that's now up to about issue 125, where it's not the book that's based on the cartoon that's running or the previous book that was based on the previous cartoon that was running. It's the one that's aimed, like this G.I. Joe comic, more for older fans. But I don't think that anything about this G.I. Joe book precludes it from being for... if there was a G.I. Joe toy line right now, and this was this month's issue of G.I. Joe, like, I think G.I. Joe was always PG-13, and this issue leans closer to PG-13, but it's like, don't forget, 1977 Star Wars, one guy chops another guy's arm off, and you see the arm, and there's blood, right? And an entire planet gets obliterated. Now, it's all about like tone and how it's played, because there isn't like a shot on the planet of like 100 people screaming in agony as they're like incinerated. But it's like, this moment where Falcon is taking his knife to this bad guy, and Falcon's not saying anything, and his eyes are in shadow, right? So it's a, I don't want to say vicious, but it is an intense moment. He's a little bit less of a person. He's a little bit more of a killing machine, but that's the mission. He's like supposed to take out this bad guy. So, I'm always sort of like cautious or anxious when the specter of G.I. Joe, like not being for kids or not being for everyone, like takes over, because it's like, well, it is an action story, and like kids do play soldier, and these are good guys taking out bad guys, anyway, I guess talk about how great the art is again.
And one of the striking things about, as we talk about the violence, is the panel where Law is quadruple tapping Sergeant Drevick to make sure that he stays down for the counts, which it's sort of done in sort of silhouette to a degree, so we're not seeing the full gore, but it's still a very striking panel, but also striking, and he's lying there with the knife still in his throat as well. But it's also striking from the point is he's quadruple tapping him, but I think he needs to, because 3 of those shots are missing him. Well, no, 2 of the shots are missing him. So I don't know if it qualifies as a quadruple tap if only one of the bullets actually lands.
I also had a little question on that panel when I got to that panel. I'm going to point out a thing that I see and another thing that I see. You know who Kewber Baal's art actually reminds me of a little bit is Igor Cordy.
Okay.
Igor Cordy is, I think, Croatian, and in American comics is best known as the third artist on Grant Morrison's New X-Men. So around 2001, 2002, Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison take over X-Men, makes a big splash. Immediately, Frank Quitely can't keep up with the monthly deadline. And so the editor gets Ethan Van Sciver, who is also very slow. And so they hire another artist. And Igor Cordy, unfortunately, this is one of these cases, you've heard about this in X-Men. It's one of these cases where like he drew an issue and they're like, oh, by the way, can you also draw the issue before the issue you just drew? Because we're that much having a deadline trouble. Igor Cordy's art, at the same time, he was also drawing Cable, which got relaunched as Soldier X. Yep. And that book, very much, if you like squint and take out the fact that the main guy's eye glows and his arm is like silver. Actually, that doesn't seem too far away from G.I. Joe. That book, Igor Cordy's work on Cable and Soldier X, feels a lot like G.I. Joe, and there's a fleshiness to how he draws faces, and he's got a really lovely inking technique that is not like pretty or slick. It's not like the John Royle Falcon cover that we see on this issue. It's much more like these like different faces that Kewber Baal is drawing in this issue, where someone's nose is a little taller, someone's eyes are a little squintier, someone's cheekbones are a little higher, someone's eyebrows are a little bushier. And Cordy, did a bunch of other stuff. He did some issues of Extreme X-Men, and he did some Tarzan crossovers with Dark Horse. I think he did Batman Tarzan, I think. But he's someone from like 20 years ago who sort of at the time I was like, man, I wish this guy would draw G.I. Joe somehow magically. And I'm seeing a little bit of that here. I don't think there's any connection necessarily, but and then the other comment that I want to make is there's a sound effect. It's on page 17. It's the final panel where it's right after Falcon is shot, and it's the final panel where he's now falling into the swamp, and Fastraw says, "I nailed the PKM gunner," and there's a great sound effect, sploot, of Falcon hitting the water. God, the pose of Falcon hitting the water, that's great. Just the perfect amount of weight, perfect amount of gravity. He's really falling there, but he looks heavy, that's a 200-pound man. But this happens every so often. I think letterers pick the colors for lettering sound effects. I think that's done at that stage, and it's not the color artist who colors sound effects. So Neil Iwatake has picked this sort of like dark gray, and then the outlines on the letters are too thick. And so the S and the P are really hard to read, and it almost becomes invisible. It almost just looks like sort of more lines in the swamp water, like inking lines, texture. But that's the sound effect. That's the sound of Falcon hitting the water, sploot, and it's awesome. But it is an artistic or technical error that I can't see it better, and that makes me a little sad.
Yeah, I was pausing because it took me this long to actually find the thing, because it was so, let's say, subtle.
I read my comics with, I'm like 2 inches from my nose, and I read comics frowning. So
I read comics frowning. It's let's put that on a business card. Some of my other points that I'd observed were it's just cool to see Fast Straw armored without all his gear. It's as we talked with Kewber Baal, he put some thought into that, and pulled it off. You can immediately figure out who it's supposed to be, without his all of his normal kind of fully fleshed out toy accurate outfit, and it from storytelling purposes makes absolute sense, and it looks cool.
Yeah, it's I always want to see Joes like with their proper gear. It's like I don't want to see them in civilian clothes, or I don't want to see like Gung Ho should be wearing like a white coat in the Arctic, but I also just want to see Gung Ho in his like normal costume. So if you said to me like, oh, half this issue is going to have Fast Draw without his helmet and without his missile launcher, and he's not going to use his missile launcher, I'd say, oh, but that's what he's for. That's so cool. But since we sort of back into seeing Fast Draw, like, oh wait, that's Fast Draw. Like, oh yeah, it makes sense. He doesn't have his gear because he's a prisoner. That is very cool.
And my another thought that I had sort of just reading this was how it's sort of continuing a trend of slightly looking back into the history of G.I. Joe and having that influence the present day stories. So as I'm thinking of the likes of so we've got this parallel, this is basically a prologue into issue 60. And recently we've seen Sarawak Sally from the early days of special missions. We've had a return to Cobra Island, which hasn't been seen at all during the IDW run. There's probably other instances of looking back, and it's sort of just continuing that kind of trend of it feels like the book is now and it's got momentum, but it's also being informed by what's come before. And I doubt anyone would have said, yes, give me that prologue to issue 60 at this point in time, but we've got it and it absolutely works.
Yeah, I wonder about Larry Hama's thought process if he like pulls a soft cover of classic G.I. Joe volume, I guess 6, off his shelf, and he flips through it and he says like, oh yeah, I remember that character that I introduced. What can I make of this? Or if Tom Waltz, has it back and forth with him and says, hey, how about a flashback about one of these 3 guys? Or if, like Hama has, based all of these characters off of people he knows, and people come and go in your life. So, maybe in 1988, when issue 60 came out, Hama based the Spook and the General off of 2 people he knew. And maybe in the last year, 1 or 2 of those people like cycled back into or out of Hama's life. And he thought, oh yeah, that's the Spook and the General. Like, let me see what I can do with that. I do think that in a general sense that these flashbacks offer a kind of I don't want to say safety, but there's a little less risk. Well, I don't like that word either. Characters haven't died yet, and you can create something new out of this more established status quo, and all the new stuff. It's a lot harder to write like an issue 295 that takes place after 294 other issues of stuff, because you and the editor and the assistant and the research specialist have to some extent remember everything that has happened, so you don't like repeat anything, much less contradict something. And if you just like, well, Falcon's not a character that we've done much with, let me do something with Falcon. Like, it's a little, again, I don't want to say safer or easier, but maybe less fraught. It's like, well, it's how Falcon joined the team. And I'm very happy to see that. I want to interrupt myself and just want to I want to finish when I was talking about page 10 a little while ago, where I was saying it had a lot of this is the page where Falcon is finally shooting the bad guy, and there are these 3 like italicized panels above, and Law is both getting pushed out of the way and also jumping and lunging for the gun. The comment that was in my head that I wanted to say aloud is, if you listen to our other episodes where we talk about the Devil's Due issues, recently I was giving the cover to Devil's Due issue 26 a hard time for having no rhythm, or maybe even having bad rhythm. That there were Joes standing there, and the arrangement, there was nothing lyrical about it, right? It wasn't just that they were stiff, it was that it sort of just felt like very arbitrarily placed. And the two characters on the top right, sort of like, Tim Seeley, the artist, in my estimation, sort of ran out of like things for them to do. And this isn't a perfect comparison, because this big panel here in issue 288 of Falcon shooting the bad guy and Law and Fast Draw getting out of the way, it's not a cover, and it's got fewer characters and fewer elements, even if you count the trees. But this is an example, this panel on this page. This page has great rhythm. The placement of elements, it's like if you were to take all the characters and black them out, if you were to take all the characters and all the trees and black them out, where there's negative space, where there's positive space, how this page leads your eye across it, it's really pretty and it's really satisfying. And that's maybe the point I was trying to make with that issue to cover to issue 26. But back to issue 288.
So yeah, I think that was the main things I wanted to talk about. Are we okay to move on to I Spy?
Yeah.
I spy with my little eye.
Okay, so my first I Spy was around on page 16 there is a picture of a vehicle which is a real world Argo ATV, which is inspired. Sorry, I think I gave the wrong number there. Sorry, I was referring to my notes rather than the actual page. There's the page where Falcon reveals his vehicle, and it's based on the real world Argo ATV, which in G.I. Joe sort of lexicon informs the adventure team vehicle. So it's kind of a nice kind of look back to G.I. Joe history, and I guess the real world vehicles that inspired the G.I. Joe toys of the time. That makes sense.
Yeah. But you're not saying it's the adventure team vehicle in this issue. You're saying there's a
I'm saying you'd look at it. Yeah, you'd look at it, and exactly, you look at it, and as a G.I. Joe fan, you'd think, oh, that's the adventure team vehicle, but it's actually the real world Argo ATV, which is the vehicle that inspired the adventure team vehicle.
My I Spy is that after our Law Spotlight issue, where we noted that Law had a new name, which connected him more concretely to the Hasbro employee after whom the action figure was likened. Law in this issue is back to his actual name as designated in his toy file card.
Yes. So we've got a Levine, not a Bazigian, that we saw in 277.
And to go back to our review of 277, we were very hard on that fact, as if it was an error, and the IDW research specialist made a Facebook comment that maybe sometimes things like that are done on purpose as a fun wink and a nod. And when I read that comment, I thought, yeah, that's right. Everyone involved actually knew what was going on, and that's not a mistake that got by 7 different people. That's in that Law issue, saying that Law's name in the issue was Bazigian, was a wink and a nod, and not a mistake.
And even if it was, it can still be a bit of a fun wink.
Yes.
That aside, yes.
I don't have any other.
No, I think I've covered all of mine.
I did have a. It's somewhere between I Spy and a favorite line. Because it's a visual. It's not something that anyone says. But I think my favorite thing that I see in this issue, actually, I mean, besides all these great faces and all that all over again, is Fast Draw's red gloves. And there are, in character design and in art, sometimes when you're drawing something or you see someone has drawn or painted something, there's just a little one thing that is either I've already used this figure of speech in this episode, but it's just a little button. It's just a little bit of like, it's a little like bonus, like after dinner mint. For example, actually, on the cover to this issue, on John Royle's cover, where Falcon is running, the thing that like the fun little thing about that cover is the insignia on Falcon's beret, right? It's just a small little detail. It's a little bit of color. I know that it's like accurate. So when I say it's fun, I don't mean to like not take it seriously. And by contrast, Kewber Baal's cover B doesn't have anything like this, and I don't say that as an insult. It's just not a cover that like wanted anything like that. So throughout this issue, like I know this is abstract. I'm getting there. Throughout this issue, we sort of back into like, oh wait, there are two other Joes, or maybe three, because one of them got shot in this story, and it's a rescue mission. And like, oh hey, there's Fast Draw. That is a crazy action figure that either doesn't make sense, but it's like it's a, you know, the G.I. Joe toy line gets a little wacky for 87 and 88 with more and more big accessories, or if it's a real thing. It's like, cool, let's see that work in this comic because that's so much fun. But then you look at his actual color choices for the action figure, and it's like there's a lot, you know, there's blue and there's green and there's gray and there's red. So the first 2 or 3 panels where we see Fast Draw in this issue, his hands are not visible because he's tied up or they're cropped out of the panel. And then all of a sudden I see these bright red gloves on page, I don't know, let's say 11. And then I keep seeing them, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to explain it any better than this, but there's a certain delight in that. Like, this isn't like, oh, you know, colorist Jay Brown got it right, because, you know, I'm not meaning to damn by faint praise. It's like, no, he's like following the model. Fast Draw has red gloves, he gets red gloves. I think I'm sort of reacting to this very small, like, it's unrealistic, you know, that in the real world you'd have a guy with red gloves, like have missiles on his backpack like this. But we've already like, we're in the world of G.I. Joe, and Gung Ho is just going to go to the Arctic wearing his vest. And I just love every couple of panels for the rest of the issue, seeing these bright red gloves, because it sort of reminds me that it's like, no, these are the toys. This is this, like, you know, this thing from childhood that I like. And 2, like, no one's running from it in this issue. It's like, no, he's in his G.I. Joe costume. It's not like it's covered in mud or it's covered in ash or he like took his gloves off because he's a prisoner. It's like, no. Gung Ho is wearing his vest in the Arctic in this issue. So it's not a line of dialogue, and it's not an I Spy, because I Spy is sometimes like Easter eggs or mistakes. It's like I think I like that it's owning it, and that it sort of is a surprise halfway through the issue.
Cool. Did you have any errors in this detected in this issue?
I did not.
Yeah, me neither. I think we're on a first. I might be wrong, but I've got a suspicion that this might be the first time that we've been all the way through an issue and not had something to say is an error. But yeah, there we go. Either we've missed something, or this is perfect in every way. So let's move on to Hammer Time, shall we?
Sure.
I can actually play the jingle.
Stop! Hammer time!
Time to beat the soles of your boots with my face. blue ninjas. And some more sucking chest wounds. Hammer time.
There we go. So, hammerisms that I detected this time. We've got some, I guess, very specific weaponry, machinery. Between all the different characters, the rockets, the type of weapons that the militia's using, the shotgun that Falcon's got, all of these kind of things. The helicopter. So that's very Larry, but I won't dwell on that. The specific hammerism that I really wanted to call out and pay attention to was the dog having the last line of dialogue for the issue. So we had.
Would you like to perform that line of dialogue?
Let me see. So we are. It's Order. What sort of accent would Order have? Where do we think he's come from? Possibly. He's a German. He's a. What's the other name for Alsatian? He's a
German Shepherd.
German Shepherd, isn't he? So possibly slightly German.
You're giving this a lot of thought.
Wolf.
And well paid off, all that thought. Wait, tell me about this. How is this a homism that the dog gets the last word?
So the dog gets the last. I didn't do an exhaustive amount of research, but there's this issue. There's also issue 79, issue 277, and issue 279 all have the dogs having the last line of dialogue for the issue.
I just want to point out that you have all those examples, and yet that's not an exhaustive search. Well, Hama is a dog owner, and I think there's an element to his writing where he's gonna play along, like not like this is for kids, but like everyone just wants to have a good time, reading these comics, and like the action figures with pets sold better, so they did more and more. They did one every year, and they kept doing it. And I think on some level, Hama has to realize that as challenging as G.I. Joe is to write, because all the characters and gear, and as silly as it is, because this guy's got missiles on his backpack and red gloves. Although I'm sorry, everyone, if that's a real military thing, I apologize. But like kids like dogs, and it's like how do you end this? This reminds me where Order gets the last word. This reminds me of the convention of like every episode of Thundercats, and this has nothing to do with Larry Hama, because Larry Hama didn't work on the Thundercats TV show or any TV shows like this in the 80s. But this convention where someone says something funny at the end of the episode, and then everyone laughs, and the camera pulls back as they laugh, and it's not quite what's happening here, because it's not the Joes that are laughing, but it feels like it's sort of speaking the same language of. It's like, yep, there's a dog, and it's going to steal the spotlight for a moment.
And I think Kewber Baal said something along the lines of that the dog was meant to have a smile, and he was like, "How do I draw a dog smiling?"
Right. I will say, as a pet owner, dogs smiling and cats smiling, it is real, but it's very subtle. Do you have more Hama-isms?
Yeah, we had. Oh no, sorry, that was it for the hammerisms. I've got some colloquialisms.
Yeah.
Should we move on to that?
Yeah.
Let's do it. So, Carson came up with a great one earlier. He talked about starting with as a butter bar rather than a PFC. So butter bar, sort of being the bar that on the uniform that you would have to denote the rank, following the entering the ROTC program and not going in as a PFC. So ROTC, the Reserve Officers Training Corps, is a group of college and university-based officer training programs for training commissioned officers of the United States Armed Forces. And the PFC is private first class. military rank held by junior enlisted personnel. So yeah, deciphering the lingo of that is all about, going into college would be a better route. Start off higher up in the ranks rather than going in right at the very bottom.
I have a comment about the letters page for this issue.
Oh.
And this happened in a previous issue where someone important in the world of G.I. Joe had died, and so instead of letters for the issue, there was a memorial. And here, Tom Waltz really wants to alert Joe fans to this new miniseries for G.I. Joe that's in the world of the animated series from the 80s. And so instead of 1 or 2 letters in this letters page, there are 4 images hyping this upcoming miniseries, G.I. Joe Saturday Morning Adventures. And if Tom Waltz, if he can get more eyeballs on this series, which looks really fun and great, and I'm all for, and I can't wait to do an episode with you and maybe Jay about it in the future. Tom Waltz totally can and should. And also, because letters pages are always the last things to get assembled for comics before they're sent off to the printer. If Tom Waltz or Megan Brown are behind schedule and it's like, let's just run something and we don't have to find a letter and get Larry to answer it, that's totally fine. But the letters page in the G.I. Joe comic is really important because it's the capstone to this 40-year dialogue that we, the fans and readers, have with Hama. The previous 20 or 22 pages are his, creativity and the artists. And then the letters page, even if it's just 2 kids in the 80s writing in saying, Scarlet's my favorite character, have Scarlet in more issues, or, whatever. It's I don't understand why Cobra Commander died in the cartoon. It's well, we don't really work on the cartoon. This is the comic. Thanks for writing, kid. Particularly since sales of this comic are not as high as they used to be in the 80s, and there isn't a robust IDW discussion board where Postbox the Pit has an online version that people chime in, and then the editors or the writer also chime in. These letters are really important to me, and now another issue without a letter and a response is a little bit of a bummer, particularly since the following 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages are ads. And so it's Tom Waltz, if you need a break or you really need to promote this book, definitely do that. But I would have rathered 1 or 2 letters, and in a month, the next page or the inside back cover are going to be that cover of Cobra Commander in the animation mode holding Aladdin's lamp. Little disappointed by that. Also, it's just hilarious because I turn the page and it's oh, I don't get letters. Well, that's a cool image. And then I look on the opposing page, which is an ad for the Rob Liefeld Snake Eyes Dead Game collection. And I never talked about this. Maybe I will in my blog upcoming. But the final issue of that miniseries was bananas. But the tagline at the bottom of this ad is, "How long can Snake Eyes keep his secret past buried?" And you all know my thoughts on this miniseries from my very, very long blog post on the first issue. But I don't remember there being much in the way in this miniseries of Snake Eyes being worried about his past staying buried. But anyway, I am very excited about G.I. Joe Saturday Morning Adventures. And it's fun that it sort of has a quote pilot in a regular Larry Hama issue of G.I. Joe.
Yeah, because of course Dan Schoening, who we spoke to when it came out, sort of unveiled that animation-esque art style on the I guess Untold Tales issue. The Snow Mission that was in the pages of the regular book.
My final comment on this issue will sound a bit like a repeat, so I'll keep it short.
Or do you want to wrap it up in your Yeah.
Yeah. I have strong feelings about the coloring in the ongoing GI Joe monthly series, and I think the more spotted blacks in the art, we both in this issue and in the previous issue, I think the better Jay Brown's coloring works for the book, because I find some of the gradients and some of the patterns to be too busy. And my sort of example here is the pages where the Joes and these bad guys are out in the woods, and there are trees behind them. And Jay Brown uses sort of a busy pattern of like a base green with some like highlights of more of a yellow green on top of them for his pattern for how to color trees. And I think that can work when the artists sort of don't draw trees. They just draw like an outline, although I don't love it. But Kewber Baal here is actually describing trees, the shape of trees, with his inking. Less so the page that actually you've put on screen now. I'm actually thinking of maybe the page where Falcon at the bottom has pulled out his knife, or the page where the Joes are running to the ATV, the reveal of the ATV. That might be a good one, where the three Joes are running to the ATV that's in the foreground. Based on the coloring of that panel, all of the background foliage is like the most important thing in the panel, because it's quite busy. And I would just treat that as like one uniform sort of dull or medium green, and let the Joes pop from it. And this kind of thing happens a lot in this issue, where background's a little busier than I would like. This really gorgeous panel of Falcon on page 3, the silent panel, the wordless panel, where young Falcon in the flashback is looking at the info chart about the Green Berets, and he's reacting to this advice he just got from the older guy. In the panel, the background color is the same color as Falcon's complexion, which is not the choice I would make. Anyway, so I would always like a different approach to color in this book, but I think the art is so strong in this issue. The colors worked pretty well in this issue. Good story, not as complex as we have seen, not as many moving parts as you said at the beginning. Wonderful to check in with some characters we haven't seen in a while. A mission that we didn't know about, tying it in with a previous issue. Extraordinary drawing, acting, layout, action, technique, poses, anatomy. Issue looks great. 8.
Wow. That's about as high as you've gone. Have we had an 8 before, do you think? I think we might have had a 1 or 2. But yeah, a big stamp of approval, given that the paper stock has not changed. So well done. Yeah, I think I'd echo all of that. It looks great. Kewber Baal was a great match for the book, and like you, I didn't really know his work beforehand, so was a little bit nervous. But great art. And very thoughtful storytelling and execution. Great story from Larry. It's a flashback that I didn't know I wanted to see, but now that I read it, it's a great story, and wasn't one I knew I wanted until I was given it to me. But I think the only slight distractions, and I like to see momentum with the G.I. Joe story. I like to see the ongoing world building and so on. So always a little bit frustrated when we're looking back to the past that the ongoing story is sort of put to the side, particularly as we only get one issue a month. So that would be one of my little niggles, but that's only minor. Hopefully some of the seeds that are planted in this issue might be followed up at some point. So maybe we might see more from the mysterious spook in general, or something along those lines. Maybe we'll find out a little bit more, and some of the things that have been planted here are not isolated to this one issue. So never know. I think I can't let you. I can't score under you, Tim, given our normal calibration of scores. So I think I'm forced into a situation where I probably have to give this a 9. And,
I mean, if you really only think it's an 8 or an 8.5, that's what.
Yeah, so maybe an 8.5, but or towards pushing towards a 9. But yeah, I very much enjoyed this story. And there, aren't really any quibbles with it at all. It's it's a great issue. I think holds will hold itself high in regard to this IDW era of Larry Hammer's ARAH issues, right up there. Excellent. So I think we are that is it for discussing that issue, really. So next time
between our previous episode where we discussed this issue and then the first half of this episode where we discussed it with someone else, I feel like we have well covered it. Yeah,
that issue that you probably took a quarter of an hour to read, we've been talking about it for 4 hours, so it's not too bad. The next time on Talking Joe, we will be talking about the next issue 289, which is a Helix and Dawn issue. And over on our Devil's Juice show, we are continuing to shine a spotlight back into the deepest depths of history in 2004 when the Devil's Due series was coming out. We're back on the main series with issue 26, and we'll continue on through that run. So join us over for that. You can find us in the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has all of those places. We've also got a Facebook group, a Twitter handle, a Instagram page, and all of that good stuff. We're on Patreon, where the likes of Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, and Justin are all getting early access to episodes, as well as some exclusive content. Tim, where can people find you?
My comic book store is Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts. And I promise I will get back to my blog. I know it's been a while. realamericanbook.com.
And I think I will shout the praises of your store from over here. Probably one of the best G.I. Joe back issue departments of any comic book store over on the east side of that place they call America. So if you're not too far away from Somerville and you're looking to fill in some gaps in your G.I. Joe collection, then it might well be worth the trek across to Hub Comics. About 2 hours away from New York, is it, Tim?
4.
4. Okay.
Well, it depends on if you're taking the train or driving. Shorter by train if you take the fast train. But yeah, let's say 4 hours.
Okay. Cool. So I think that is us done. But remember,
nobody beats Talking Joe, a real American podcast.
With a guy from America, a guy who was in his car talking to us from some lay-by, and also me in England. Laters.